Hello everybody, my name is Dave. I'm a full stack developer and this is my approach to creating a JavaScript HTML calculator. I am using Visual Studio Code as my text editor. I have added an empty folder called My Calculator to my workspace, and I have my built-in Git Bash terminal here in the bottom, and I'm in the same folder there as well. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and create the files that I will need. And let's make sure it's there. Okay, we're looking good. Let's open it here visually so we can see them. Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin with our HTML to create the framework that we're going to need with all the identifications for the buttons, values, etc., and their containers. So we're going to begin by selecting an HTML5 boilerplate. Calculator. Control S to save. And I will continue. I'm going to go ahead and link my JavaScript and style sheet to this index file here. So first we'll do the style sheet. I'm using link with the style sheet, and then the type is a text CSS, and then a direct line. It's in the same folder. So next I'm going to do the same with the script.js file. So we'll do that here. Control S to save. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and create my container, which is a div. I'm going to go ahead and create a form, which will help me with all of my button actions and stuff like that. So, and I'll give that a name as well. And within that form, I'm going to start putting in my inputs and then giving them IDs. Okay, next I'm going to start putting in all of my buttons. And I'm going to make one and then copy and paste the rest, and then just change all of the various types and values and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to turn off the video, go ahead and copy this to create all of the buttons that I need, and I'll show you how I change them. Okay, so what I have done is copy and pasted and changed all of my buttons to have their own IDs, all with the general name of button and their own unique values, including operators that I like in the order. So I'm going to file save and then check it out. So far this is what I have. There's no styling yet, and nothing works yet, but I have all my buttons in there and my IDs. So let's go ahead and start getting on our CSS. Okay, now that we have our index page with all of the things that we need for our calculator to be displayed, I need to add some style to it. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the CSS. I'm going to copy and paste in sections so that you can see how they affect the page. So we've already connected our page here. Now it's an empty style sheet. So I'm going to start by creating some padding and stuff like that. Okay, and what this does is zeroes out the padding in the margin so it's completely flush in the browser. So I'll save that. Next, I'm going to add the background and the font, and I'm going to do that to all of the HTML. Okay, I'm going to start adding styling to all of the title tags. Okay, centering, color, background, stuff like that. File save. Okay, I'm going to add some style to the container. Control S. There we go. Notice how the calculator's starting to change, take some shape. Okay, now I'm going to add all of my input styling. Things like the buttons, text. So let's Control S and look at it again. Kaboom. Okay, so now we added the styling. Nothing works yet. Now we need to work on our JavaScript. So once again, added padding and margin, added general styling to the background and the font in the HTML. These are the lines that are above and below the calculator. This is the title that's centered, that says calculator. This is the overall container styling. And then these are the input styles right here. And that's the gist of our CSS. Now we need to make our JavaScript file, which I have an empty one here. We're going to use the concepts that we have learned so far. That is why it is important to note that there's IDs, names, values, and types that are all relative to the functions that we're going to be making. So remember to keep that in mind. Start working on our JavaScript file. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a window.onload function. And the reason I'm doing this is that it's going to guarantee that this JavaScript file won't load until all of these elements load before it, because of how we have it set up. And that just ensures no errors will happen by doing so. This is the shell that I'm working in. So now there are two parts to the calculator that are very, very important in the way that I'm approaching this, and that is the input box here, which has the ID of input box, which holds all of the displays of whatever button is pushed, plus the calculation results. And the container itself, which holds all of the buttons that we're going to need, plus its values. So those are the first two things I'm going to identify and call within this function. So Okay, the reason that we brought in the whole container is because we want to be able to drill down into the container to target the specific buttons and their values. This way, we have the overall shell to work with and everything within it. So when we use the target, we can create an event function that will house all of that drill down. So let me show you what I mean. Use a click event, and then I'm going to add an event function within there, and I'm going to use E as my parameter, which will represent the event. Because that event is being triggered, I'm going to add a name of button click and then assign the target. We're getting and using the parent container here, and we're using the event listener to use the event parameter of target to identify the ID of what's within that container, which are the buttons. Okay, so now that we've called our button click function here, we need to make it. So now that we're in our container, our goal now with this button click function using the ID is to identify and assemble all of the values when clicking certain buttons. The buttons that we don't want to include in this step are the clear and the equal because they have their own functions. But as far as the rest goes, our simple goal here is to assemble everything within this function so that it creates a string here, so we could basically start doing, like 1 plus 2 minus 10 or whatever, so that we can create a string to input to calculate. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is exclude the clear and the equal button because they aren't really part of creating or concatenating strings for me to add or multiply together. And in the HTML, that would be this ID for the clear and this ID for the equal. So let's go ahead and create an if statement in here. So now that if it's not either of those buttons, then we need to get the element and the ID. So now that I have the button and its value, I'm going to assign it so I can manipulate it without doing any damage to the original. I'm going to use that temp and use a built-in JavaScript function called replace. So what this replace value does is that this is the item to be replaced, and then it replaces it with a blank. So when we click on these buttons, instead of it saying button 1, it's just basically going to return 1. And same with 2 and 3. It's just removing the preface so that the ID will be basically a number in a string format. We'll create something called entries. And inside, we're going to put the TMP. So now that we called it, we're going to have to make it. Okay, so now let's make our entries function here. So what this is doing is concatenating the values that we enter by pressing the buttons within the container, right? So it's using the input value and it's adding the temp that we've created. Here, I'm going to change these. I don't think this is going to work. Getting errors there. Here, I'm going to make them single. Okay, let's save that. Refresh. And notice how I can add things here in the display now. Now, nothing calculates, nothing clears yet, but we're able to create strings of numbers and operators in the input box. So we're off to a good start. Now we need to create the other functions that, such as calculate, clear, and so on. Let's use standard practice and put it with our other assignment statements here. And we'll start off with one called, a variable called calc. Okay, now we're going to create an event listener that will call the calculate function that we're going to make for it. So okay, so let's go ahead and create our calculate function. So that when if somebody just adds a decimal, that's an incorrect entry, and we'll advise them to put in a mathematical expression. Okay, and then let's return the alert. So our calculate function, I went ahead and added in this additional input evaluate. And let's go ahead and test the calculate. It should give me this alert if I try to enter this, but just a decimal. And let's see if it works. 3 plus 3. Okay. My clear still doesn't work. Let's refresh this. So the calculate button is working. Now we need to work on the clear and the clear function. So let's go up here under calculate. And I'm going to put this at the end. We're going to create a function called erase. And then all we're going to do is use the input value like we used before, but it's going to equal an empty string. Let's give it a test. So 4 plus 4, let's clear it, boom. It's 4 times 2 equals, okay, let's clear that. So it looks like we have a functioning working calculator.